Chapter 276. Now the East also grows wheat. Paris muttered as if to remind himself. The eastern part of the empire, which is very different from other parts of the empire in terms of topography and climate, cannot produce wheat, the main food. That was the common sense of the East, which had continued for a long time. And the biggest weakness of the East. Because of that, they always had to keep an eye on the central and other regions. But now it's changed because the East also had the technology to produce wheat on its own. In the meantime, Lorraine has been through a lot. She was studying wheat production that fits for the East while avoiding the eyes of others in such a distance from Luman. Lorraine blushed slightly at my compliment. I didn't do it alone. Without the scholars of Lombardy sent by Tia, I would not have dreamed of it. But I shook my head. What I said was not empty words. Even after having a leak along the way, Lorraine did not stop researching wheat production methods. It was a pain started in the courage coming here from Luman, so I said everything. Scholars are literally just people who have knowledge and do research. It's Lorraine who has brought those people together and led them all the way here, so you don't have to be too humble. Thank you, Tia. As she answered, Lorraine smiled wider than ever before. At that moment, I remembered what my grandmother, Sora, once said. There are flowers that grow better in other places than where they were originally born and took root. The rain who left Lombardy where she was born and came to the east was in full bloom. As if she had finally found a place to take root. I put my hand on Lorraine's shoulder and turned towards Perez. Still half dazed, he was still fiddling with his fingertips. At the same time, his gaze could not leave the ripe wheat field. In the meantime, Patriarch Lumen has been through a lot. Patriarch Lumen, he needed a trick to do research here and there secretly, so he had to pretend he was completely on Chanton's side. How pathetic his eyes that secretly looked at me whenever we met at the conference. It wasn't once or twice that I almost burst into laughter whenever I looked at Patriarch Lumen like that. He looked similar to Avenox, but was much more blunt. Ah, yes, Perez, the wheat production in the East will make a big impact. That's right. It's not unexpected. It was just a change that would happen immediately. First of all, Susu's influence on the East will be greatly reduced because Lumen will no longer have to depend on the South for food. Now the Lumen family was ready to jump into the central political arena as one of the main pillars of the empire in earnest. It's something they've been longing for a long time, and their dependence on Eastern trade will also decrease. They no longer have to bring food from outside, but that will make it difficult for not only Susu, but also Lombardy to deal with Luman. In the meantime, it is true that the East was superficially under the influence of Susu, and in reality it was under my grasp. If it wasn't for the Pella trade ship and cruise that connects the East with the Central right now, they would be isolated again. However, with the production of food, the East will soon be self-sufficient, just like Ivan in the North, who has an abundance of minerals and has independent political power. In other words, it meant getting out of my grasp. You're right, Paris. At my calm reply, Paris wrinkled his brows as if he did not know the reason. Do you want to know why? I don't understand it. Even the scholars of Lombardy are moving and intervening in something that doesn't beneficial to you. Well, because, how should I explain this well? After pondering for a while, I chose a simple and straightforward path. I am also the matriarch of Lombardy, but soon I will become the empress of the empire. Tia. If the East has independent power, your work will be much easier in the future. Don't you think so, Perez? The emperor's authority comes from force and wealth. However, how he maintains his authority depends on how much he keeps the nobles under his control, in check and balances the breathtaking power. Think of it as a kind of wedding gift, Perez. And come to think of it, you gave me the amendment bill to the Empress Succession Act and the ring while proposing, but I didn't do anything. I said so jokingly, but Perez still just stared at me. I still have something to show you. You shouldn't make that face already. I'm scared now, Tia. Exaggerated. After I glanced at Perez once, I asked Lorraine. Should I follow this road to the north? Yes, if you go over the hill over there, you'll see it right away. Thank you. I'll be right back. After waving a small hand to Lorraine, I began to walk along the straight road, but the back is empty. There is no sound of footsteps following. I just turned my head and looked back, and I urged Perez, who was still standing in place as if he was nailed. What are you doing? I still have more to show you. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Climbing the hill after Florentia, Perez wiped his still dazed face with the palm of his hand. East's independent weight production. Tia explained everything, but he couldn't understand. How could that be? Her action was like putting down the weapon she had in her hand. If she could control the East, she could have unwavering power as the matriarch of Lombardy and as the empress of the empire. But she untied the leash on the East side and said it was a wedding gift. It was almost as if Perez would rather laughed in vain at the huge gift that was suddenly in his arms. Oh, I guess it's over there. When he entered the wooded area, Tia's voice, which was especially clear and refreshing, woke him from his thoughts. It looks like this. It's definitely a little different in person. As he followed the green eyes that spoke to himself where he couldn't understand the meaning well, there was a wide field just like before. Perez's eyes became sharp. It resembles the wheat field he encountered a while ago, but a completely different scene unfolded in front of him. Why is one side all dead weight? The structure of the wheat fields laid across a road was similar. However, the difference was that it was but the difference was that all the wheat on the left had withered the back in the direction looking down. All the wheat that had not yet ripened was lying on the floor one by one. It was like looking at the farmland left behind after a rough horse's hoof had had swept it once. Do you know why the nobles look at Chanton Susu so desperately these days, Perez? It is not a day or two for the lords of an area in need of food to panic in front of Susu, who owns the granary. But recently, the degree has become even worse. No matter how close the harvest season was, Perez secretly ordered an investigation because something was unclear, and the report he received just a few days before leaving for this trip, plague, an unknown disease originating in the southeast, was killing all the wheat. The disease, which spreads like wildfire, said that none of the previously known methods worked. Even experienced farmers thought this was a punishment from heaven and put down their agricultural equipment. Also, the disease is worse than other grains. It caused great damage to wet crops. So naturally, the wheat production in the south would decrease compared to the last time, and nobles of Prosusu, who noticed it earlier than anyone else, had no choice but to try to win Chanton Sisu's favor as purely as the reduced wheat. However, unlike the nobles who fight only for this harvest right now, the disease of wheat farming has become even greater for Perez, who rules the entire empire. You know, right? If this continues, the entire empire will be in danger because it's spreading so fast. By now, the central part of the south must already be affected. Perez's complexion darkened. The central plains in the south were where the granary areas of Susu were concentrated. Even if we were lucky enough to pass this harvest season, we didn't know what would happen next. After receiving the report, he hurriedly planned to dispatch the Academy scholars to the south, but the outcome was not guaranteed. As such, the momentum of the plague was so terrifying. If this continues, there will be a famine throughout the empire. Florentia, holding his back, said with a sigh, and many people will die, Perez. It was a simple prediction, but Perez got goosebumps. It was because he felt strange power from her murmuring words. From an instinctive perspective, Florentia was still looking at the wheat fields, but Perez thought it might not be. Her gaze was not because of the wheat field in front of her, but because she seemed to be looking further into the future. It was when Perez opened his mouth to ease Tia's anxiety. Tia, don't worry too much. So I found a cure. What? With disease, I found a cure. End of chapter 276. Chapter 277. Her finger pointed to the two wheat fields, which were divided exactly in half. Originally, both of these places had withered from the plague a few months ago. Para's gaze moved to the right, unlike the left, which had completely withered. The wheat field on the right was no different from what he had seen before climbing the hill. Growing high up to the waist, the golden wheat was in a state of waiting only for harvest, but that place was also damaged by the plague. Although Lombardi scholars have found a cure, I thought it was a little late. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like it. She spoke as if nothing had happened, but Perez couldn't keep up, and he asked, hopefully with a strange foreboding, Tia, are you going to tell everyone about the cure? Yes, I will. Why? In the end, the questions that Perez had been holding on burst out from his mouth. How come you don't use it? He couldn't understand. If he had a cure in his hand, he would use it. A terrible plague that has never been experienced before, and the upcoming cold season. Everything was perfectly organized. A plate that can bring everyone to their knees in front of Florentia. Lombardi was who has the cure. However, at Perez's question, Florentia fell into thought, saying, the person who had been answering so easily over the whole empire until now was funnily choosing a word for this easy question. Finally, her lips opened. Because I can do it. Because you can do it. Yeah, I told you, a lot of people are going to die, and I can stop it. She do it because she can. It was her words. Is the explanation a bit weak? Tia tilted her head slightly and said this with smile. Lombardy doesn't destroy the whole chessboard to win one game. Looking down at the empire that united the western continent like a single chessboard, it couldn't be helped but sounds like Lombardy. After this one game, shouldn't we continue to win? In order to do that, the chessboard doesn't look good until it goes bad. Then what about the south? Paris could not bear it and asked hastily, are you planning to give the cure to the south? If this plague continues, it would be the south that would suffer the most. The wheat production from the vast plains was the sharpest weapon the Susu family had, but Tia nodded and answered immediately. Of course. Why? Why do you want to give them the cure? TN, honestly, is it wrong to give the cure to others? I'll also do it if it's about the lives of people in the country, especially if I'm rich like Tia. At Paris' question, she rolled her big eyes once and said, of course, it was a mistake for Chanton Susu to touch Lombardy. In particular, it is a big mistake to try to wield it at will, not to mention crossing the eastern trade of Cheshire. However, she added, there's no reason for the people of the south to suffer because of the foolishness of Chanton Susu. She was adamant. Perez stared at Tia as if he was a scolded little child. Perhaps she felt that gaze. She grinned. And I never said I'd give it for free. I'll take what I have to get, especially for that black bear. Tia said, clenched her fists. Ha! Perez eventually laughed in vain, putting his hand on his forehead. Taking a few steps, after taking a few deep breaths in that state, he raised his head again. Tia was still looking at him with a smile on her face. Tia, you. The golden waves of the wheat fields also lost their brilliance before her. A person who shines brighter than anyone else. What kind of woman did I fall in love with? He couldn't help but laugh helplessly, like a man who was caught off guard. Come on, let's go, Perez. Tia reached out her hand. Now I really have to go to Lumen. I have to see Lix too. and I'm really tired. She grumbled like a child to the point where it could be wondered if she was the one who was comparing the empire to the chessboard a while ago. Paris looked at her hand, which had reached out in front of him for a moment before clasping it as if wrapped around it. The slender hand came into one hand as if it had been tailored for him, and just like any day in his childhood, Paris smiled quietly as he looked at the back of Tia, who took the lead. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. A few days later, the wedding day of Lorraine Lombardi and Avenux Luman has come. The reason the Luman family, who had been busy with the final preparations, became even more noisy was because the guests of the bride's side, the Lombardi family, had just arrived at the Luman's mansion, that bastard, Black Bear. Since the first day in Luman, I have been constantly receiving reports about the family's journey through the Pellet Corporation. Again, the culprit was Chanton Sisu. Perhaps it was a very deliberate decision. From the moment the people of Lombardy tried to enter Susu's land, they made a fuss one by one. It was very picky from the armed forces of escorting soldiers and knights to the noblemen's loss on traffic. In the end, the families who missed the original scheduled cruise had to wait 2 full days for the next ship to be ready in a hurry. I was almost the only member of the bride's family at Lorraine's wedding. The end. I put it back. Chanton is really annoying. I'm really going to take away a jar of honey. From 1 to 10, it was a black bear with favorite corner. A jar of honey. Oh, right. I wasn't alone right now. I and Perez were just waiting at the front door of the mansion to meet my family as the carriage carrying them had arrived. There is such a thing. It's a bad desire to want to see a dragging bear. Oh, it's my father. Tia. The door of the carriage that came in at the forefront was slammed open, and my crying father ran towards me. Seeing that his skin was less glossy than usual, I thought he had a hard time to keep up with the wedding day. I'm here, Dad. Are you okay? Did you get hurt anywhere? How reckless were the soldiers of Sisu. I will report each and every one of Sisu's action in detail, Lord. Oh, Clarivan. Clarivan, who was in the same carriage as my father, approached and spoke in a cool voice. T.N. Ah, Clarivan, I missed you. Seeing him raising his glasses with a very sensitive face, he seemed to be firmly angry. You shouldn't have touched him, Black Bear. You're in trouble now. The second carriage just came to a halt as I was dragging my tongue towards the Chanton Sisu's future. Then I saw my grandfather open the door with his own hands and got off. Like my father, his complexion looked a little tired, but somehow he looked much better. He stretched his back and even had time to look around the Luman family's mansion. However, Luman family's employees were stumped and could not easily reach my grandfather. My grandfather used to be a little scary in his old days. I shook my head at the sight and walked to my grandfather. Grandpa. Oh, Tia. As soon as my grandfather saw me, his expressionless face filled with a wrinkled smile. You're here, Elder Lord Lombardi. I don't think it was necessary for you to come, Your Majesty. Of course, the moment he saw Perez standing next to me, my grandfather did not hide his displeasure at the man who stole his granddaughter. My grandfather is coming. How can I do that? Grandfather. It was a statement of the fact that the relationship between him and myself, who was engaged, was already like a family. My grandfather shut his mouth disapprovingly and soon turned his head away from Perez, and he asked me, Yeah, did everything go well? Of course, Grandpa. I smiled triumphantly. I'm going to hit even the things that made my grandfather suffer today, and I'm going to take it well. Really? Grandfather looked at me with strange eyes for a moment and soon burst into laughter. Pwahaha. That big stubborn man's face will be worth seeing. Ha 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 ha. Oh, stubborn man. The end in Korea is byung byung. It took me more time to find the meaning. That's the perfect nickname. I should consider changing the title of Chanson Susu from Black Bear to Stubborn Man. It was when my grandfather, who kept laughing loudly, was watching the back view of the entrance into the Lumen mansion. Tia. The same but different voices called me all at once. At the same time, a large hand swung around me. Are you hurt anywhere? Are you okay? Did anything happen? You just arrived. Aren't you tired? You still have good stamina. Gilio, Meron. But Lombardi's vice captain, no, that's not what's important. Did anything happen? Why didn't you at least send me a letter in the middle? The twins frantically wandered around, wondering if they were going to check my condition from head to toe. I wasn't in the mood for that. Thank you for coming a long way, Auntie. I was escorted by Perez and greeted Shannonette, who had just got off the carriage. Long trips are tough, and, however, Shannonette's pale complexion's eyes turned sharp in an instant. When we have time, let's talk about Chanton Susu. What the hell have you done, Black Bear? After Clarivan, who make it bloody when he get touched. He even bought the hatred of Shannonette, who doesn't get angry easily. When I go back to Lombardy, I wondered if I don't have to step up. Thus, all the people of Lombardy arrived safely in Luman, and there were people who longed for it more than I did. Grandpa, aunt, uncle. It was Lorraine. Lorraine, who had come down the stairs half running at a rapid pace, stood in front of the Lombardy family, and she couldn't talk for a while. Even from where she was standing, I could see her hesitant lips quivering. And when Lorraine is trying to say something, long time no see, Lorraine. My grandfather, who said so, hugged Lorraine tightly. Oh, even a flower that has taken root in a new place misses the arms of its family. Eventually, my father and Shannonette hugged Lorraine, who shed tears. A sunny Eastern morning with a fresh breeze. It was Lorraine's wedding day. End of chapter 277. Chapter 278. On the meadow, overlooking the blue sea, the white cloth fluttered along the gentle sea breeze. The outdoor wedding hall, decorated in off-white and white according to Lorraine's taste, was enough to evoke admiration from everyone. Just like the East Coast, where blood ties are particularly strong, Hundreds of guest seats were already filled with people. As the people of Lombardy, including me, Perez, and my grandfather, entered the wedding hall, the curious eyes of the guests gathered. As we are accustomed to attracting attention wherever we go, an employee of the Luman family approached us and talked to us, who were looking for a seat without paying much attention. Welcome, take this flower and sit in the front seat. The white flower, resembling a rose given one by one to each person, was the symbol of the Lumen family and its native flower, calica. I looked around and all the guests were holding a calica. Shall we go to our seats? That is said to everyone in the party. As the employee said, our seats was right in front of the podium, where the bride and groom would stand. I glanced to the side, trying not to step on the white cloth as much as possible on the passage where the two would enter. Paris was walking right next to me. As I walked, my hair with my half forehead exposed was swaying. This feels a little weird. Walking down the aisle for the groom and the bride together. I guess it's over there. Embarrassed, I cleared my throat and pointed to the empty white chairs. As we were the last guests to arrive, the wedding soon began. Traditional Eastern wedding music began to play in the distance, and Patriarch Luman, dressed in a beige suit with long sleeves and hem, stepped onto the podium, and wow, beautiful! Exclamations flowed from all over the guest seat. It was because Avenox and Lorraine appeared under the arch, decorated with small white wildflowers, not calica. The man and woman who would soon become husband and wife were in harmony. Other than that expression, there was nothing to fully explain the two of them. Avenox was smiling brightly like the sun, and Lorraine was smiling shyly next to him. The two got along as if they were born for each other. Swish, swish. The stubble mark was left on the white silk spread on the meadow, following the steps of the bride and groom. In everyone's reverent silence, Lorraine and Avenox finally stood in front of Patriarch Luman. Indeed, Luman, who could not hide his excitement for a moment and looked at the two of them, opened his mouth. Avenox Luman and Lorraine Lombardi have promised to become lifelong companions at this meeting with many people today. Throughout the brief but joy-filled wedding celebrations, that was how Patriarch Indit Luman was smiling. The elongated scar on his chin twitched without knowing the body aches. This is the only bottle of wine in the world. After the congratulatory speech, the Patriarch Luman raised a bottle of wine with nothing written on it and said, "In the year Avenox was born, it is the alcohol that I, who is his father, made by myself. It was just for today." Indeed, Luman's large hand opened the wine bottle, and two small glasses shared red liquor. If two people share this wine under a sacred pledge, Lorraine Lombardi and Avenox Luman will be married. The two glasses were soon delivered to Avenox and Lorraine's hands. Sitting in the front row, I could see Lorraine's fingertips shaking finely. "You're nervous." In a way, it was natural. The number of guests is not important. How can you not be trembling at the moment when you make a promise for the rest of your life with one person? I silently clenched my fists in support of Lorraine. Avenox, who was looking at Lorraine with her long eyelashes fluttering through her mellow eyes for a moment, vowed first. "Miss Lorraine, I promise to be by your side to make you smile for the rest of my life." The wine in his glass disappeared at once. Now everyone was waiting for Lorraine's pledge. Her face blushed slightly. She exhaled briefly and said, "The day my life ends." It was a small but clear voice. "I hope that I will be able to lie down next to Sir Avenox." Lorraine, who tilted her glass with trembling hands, patiently emptied all her wine. The final step in the marriage vows was to put flower crowns made of calica on the two. It was a blessing from the patriarch for the two who started a new journey in life. Like that, the two Corollas, returned to their place, and Patriarch Luman solemnly proclaimed it. "I hereby declare that Avenox Luman and Lorraine Lombardi are married." The guests stood up in unison and began to applaud. After going through a lot, Lorraine and Avenox finally became a couple. They walked the path they had entered together a while ago as a true one. "Congratulations, Lorraine." Having said that, my grandfather handed the calica flower to Lorraine. Eventually, Lorraine's big eyes were filled with tears, but it was just the beginning. Guests from all sides threw flowers over the silk hallway. It was as if flowers were falling from the sky. The couple stepped forward step by step. "Congratulations, congratulations. You have to live a happy life." In the blessing of countless people, a petal of calica fell to the corner of Lorraine's eyes, who was smiling happily. "Miss Lorraine." Avenox, who stopped walking for a moment, reached out his hand and carefully removed the white petals. Poofed, haha, the two burst into laughter at the same time. They look alike. People who love each other deeply resemble each other. Lorraine and Avenox were already very similar. The two people holding hands in the white rain of flowers smiled happily. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The East is really exciting place. The reason I'm saying this is because the wedding goes on for 3 days and nights. It is said that only the main ceremony is 3 days. After that, if you do a follow-up session, usually a week goes by lightly. Clarivan answered with a tired face like mine. It was daytime when the wedding vows were made. Even though the sky had already darkened, the buzzing atmosphere did not subside. Wow, they are really serious about playing. It was just by looking at the prepared banquet hall. Living in Lombardy, I was proud to say that I had attended all kinds of noisy banquet, but the wedding in the East was different level. Most of the guests who attended the pledge ceremony were still there. It was different from people in the center who talked quietly, saying they were polite. They all ate and drank happily, laughing and chatting about whether they were all relatives. Also, what about the banquet hall? The banquet hall where food was piled up like mountains, here and there was bright and spacious as if borrowing the midday sun. It was because the large windows were wide open and the boundary between the inside and the outside was removed. Oh, I'm tired. A little while ago, I was walking around dealing with people looking for me, and my feet were itching. I took a seat and sat down in a place that would not be easily seen by people. Then I'll be back after talking a bit more. Okay, Clarivan, do your best for me. When I waved my hand gently to Clarivan, who smiled bitterly with a face with dark circles down, I was really left alone, but there was no loneliness. I'm so glad that Lorraine came to the east. I talked to myself as I watched Lorraine from afar with Avinox, surrounded by many people, having a conversation. I was worried that it might still be unfamiliar. It seems like she was all over the place. Lorraine looked really happy. Here, Lorraine found her home. It's nice to see. For a long time, I was watching Lorraine and Avinox, and a familiar voice spoke to me. Matriarch Lombardi. Ah, Patriarch Luman. It's a beautiful wedding. Thank you for the compliment. It's all thanks to the matriarch. Hey, what are you saying? No, I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart. Patriarch indeed, Luman said with a serious face. It was all thanks to the matriarch that Lorraine arrived safely in the East, and that trade in the East was able to be maintained so successfully, and I will never forget that you sent scholars from Lombardy for this research. All I did was write, though. Still, this kind of polite greeting from Patriarch Luman, who is about the same age as my father, is a little embarrassing. I changed the topic. Have you seen the wet field? Ah, as soon as I brought up the story of the wheat field, Patriarch Luman's face was brightened. Yes, the moment I saw the golden field, I was embarrassed to cry. Indeed, Luman smiled haphazardly. Now that I think that the people of the East won't starve anymore. Aside from being Avinok's father, Indeed Luman was also a good householder. You've been through a lot with Chanton Susu. Thank you. It's all thanks to the matriarch. You're doing that again. I scratched my cheek awkwardly and asked about the person who came into my eyes to change the topic once again. By the way, Patriarch Luman, yes, tell me. Hey, who are these people? End of chapter 278. Chapter 279. Wherever I glanced, there was a group of people in black uniforms that are similar but slightly different. They were of various ages, genders, and appearances, and they were enjoying a banquet among themselves on the other side of the banquet hall. There was a strange atmosphere even though they were not sitting at an angle and maybe a little too free-spirited. A person who is still a little A person who is a little sensitive can never ignore the weight. As if to prove it, there seemed to be an invisible wall between them and the other guests. Eastern people kept their distance without ever getting close, even if they knew who they were. Thanks to this, their surroundings were quite quiet in the crowded banquet hall. Oh, Patriarch Luman chose the word once, the Duke of Knox from the Eastern continent and his subordinates. Eastern continent? This time I was quite surprised. Of course, I knew that there were countries in the Eastern continent where people lived and had a long history. However, it is so far away that there is no interaction with the Lumbro Empire. Isn't it too far to cross the sea? At my question, Patriarch Luman. Yes, however, the navigation skills and techniques of the Eastern continent are superior to ours. Not only related to the sea, they constantly study a technology called mana engineering. That's why they say there are a lot of amazing things. Oh, really? Indeed, Luman's explanation stirred my inner instinct as the matriarch of Lombardy. Oh, it was literally discovering a new continent. Luman has traded frequently with the Eastern continent since ancient times, so I sent them a wedding invitation. I really didn't expect them to come. It's the Eastern continent. It was a place where it could be a new market. As expected. TN, as expected, Tia, you're a merchant to the bone. Besides, the word mana engineering was appealing to my ears. If you are interested in the Eastern continent, talk to the silver-haired Duke of Knox over there. Is that guy over there? In this crowded banquet hall, there was only one man with clean, dazzling silver hair. That person is the Duke. A man named Duke of Knox was sitting alone on the sofa with one leg crossed, sipping his drink. If there is not even a movement to turn the wine glass in one hand from time to time, I wonder if it is a painting. Unlike our Western continent titles exist in the Western continent, Duke, Marquis, Count, Viscount, and Baron in that order, and he's a Duke among them. Yes, that's right. Also, the Eastern continent has two unique features. Patriarch Lumen swept his lips once and spoke a little awkwardly. Unlike the Lumbro Empire, which had a strong imperial power, unify the Western continent, the Eastern continent is divided into several kingdoms and empires. It's a chaotic time. In addition, indeed Lumen's voice was slightly lowered. Organizations that have grown and established themselves in each province have greater power than the imperial power and royal power. Organization? Are you talking about something like a dark district? Well, that's what it is. Then to talk to that Duke Knox. The Duke of Knox's full name is Killian Knox, and he is the head of the organization called Knox, after his surname. In other words, Patriarch Lumen smiled awkwardly, as if it was difficult for him to speak in front of me. It is said that he had more power than the emperor of the Rumpelt Empire. where the Duke was located. Besides, not long ago, rumors circulated that the mana artifacts were successfully weaponized. Then he must be a man with unparalleled power. After listening to Patriarch Luman's explanation, I now understood. At first glance, the executives of the Nox organization in black uniforms seemed to be scattered in an orderly manner, but at the center of it was the Duke, as if escorting him. How strong is his personal power? There are not one or two eyewitness accounts of people tearing apart with their bare hands. Really, he's like a monster. That was when I said that. Duke Knox, who had only been looking at the glass of wine in a drowsy manner, raised his head and looked at me. Did you hear my voice from that place? As if to tell me that my thoughts were right, our eyes met perfectly, and I got goosebumps all over my body. It was leaving. Under the bright lights of the banquet hall, Duke Knox's eyes shone strangely with golden light. Oh, somehow I couldn't move. It was as if I was facing a huge being that was not human. Tia. At that time, Perez blocked me. Apparently, he was talking to the nobles of the east from afar. Perez, staring at Killian Knox, did not hide his cold anger. What is that guy? That evil? Do you want to die? From where I appeared, the twin stood by my side. Then there was a reaction from the other side as well. Knox executives, who seemed to be relaxing while drinking alcohol, were standing up from their seats one by one with their faces hardened. The expressionless faces of the people who had been chatting and playing a while ago seemed to rush towards this direction with just one gesture from Duke Knox. As the situation went on, people who filled the banquet hall felt something strange and began to look around one by one. At this rate, Lorraine's wedding will be ruined. How difficult is it to open an open space, but we can't make it that way. Perez, I'm fine. I stopped Perez, who was staring at the Duke of Knox with an unprecedented cold face. And in the Knox camp, one person moved. She was a woman with high-rise curly black hair that stood out. Likewise, in a black uniform, she trudged up to Duke Killian Knox. Then, without hesitation, she was seen touching the Duke's shoulder and frowning and saying something. Is that okay? Isn't that right? Unknowingly, I'm worried about a woman whose name I don't know. Something like a lie happened. Duke Knox, who was exuding a thick flesh that stinging skin, quickly turned his head, and as if he had never done that, he started drinking again. The tension, which had been pulled tightly as if something would happen right away, disappeared. Knox executive, who had been on alert, began to chat again. Whoa. I let out a small sigh without realizing it. It could be seen that the woman on the other side was shaking her head as if it was the same for her over there. Oh, we made eye contact. The woman looked at me. Her eyes were very red, just like Perez. I've never seen anyone with red eyes like that other than him. Maybe it means she's sorry. Anyway, it was me who made the mistake first. I also made eye contact, greeted her. It was quite a distance from the other side of the banquet hall. But why is it that a feeling of sympathy is conveyed for some reason? Tia, what's wrong? Oh, Lorraine. Did she notice that the atmosphere is not good? The complexions of Lorraine and Avinox approaching, we're not good. It's a day where just being happy isn't enough. Feeling sorry for some reason, I smiled even more broadly. It's no big deal. Aren't we supposed to talk a little more with people? Yes, I said. I and Sir Avinox are a little tired. Nothing really happened, right? Of course. Oh, that's right, I said, holding Lorraine's hands tightly. Congratulations on your wedding, Lorraine. Oh, thank you, Tia. Lorraine blushed as if she had dyed her cheeks with flowers. You must have heard it dozens of times all day today. Are you shy now? It's not anyone else. And Tia tells me that, so somehow I really feel it. Congratulations, Sir Avenox. Do you live a pretty life? Of course. About Lorraine, don't worry, Matriarch Lombardi. Honestly, when I first let Lorraine run away at that night, I felt very anxious. This was done because I knew how Lorraine's life ended in the last life. Just because he wasn't that bastard back then. There was no guarantee that he would be a person who could make Lorraine happy. Fortunately, however, Avenox cared about Lorraine more than anyone else. Even if I didn't have to ask, I could tell by looking at the affectionate eyes that moved silently between the two of them. I'm happy. I smiled satisfactorily and caught the two shot of Lorraine and Avinox in my eyes. I'm about to get jealous. A low voice came to my ears when I was nodding my head and the appearance of Avinox lovingly looking at Lorraine. What, Tia, you're looking at a man other than me? Avinox is a man? No, he's a man. We're a family now. I want you to see only me. The symptoms are getting worse. Perez said like a light sigh. I say it like a joke, but I know that he is serious. I narrowed my eyes and clicked my tongue. You are very serious, but don't hate me, Tia. I can't hate you. I'm serious too. No matter what he does, I can't hate Perez. You know everything. But it was a little cheeky, so I slapped Perez on the side without pain. Then Lorraine said to us like that, Tia looks happy too. Saying that and smiling, Lorraine's face looked similar to mine a while ago. Is that an illusion? It's a relief, right? Despite so much going on, the fact that we're happy together here like this, how miraculous it is. Lorraine, who was smiling while facing me, looked at my back. At the same time, as if the flowers were blooming, a smile that could not be hidden spread around Lorraine's lips. Leaks. End of chapter 279. Chapter 280. A very small baby in Avenox's arms approached and familiarly visited Lorraine's arms. Wow, he's just like his daddy. Looking at Lix, I murmured involuntarily. I It feels like you're hugging a little Avenox. At my words, Lorraine folded her eyes beautifully and laughed. Right? At first, I thought he resembled me because of the color of his eyes. But as the days go by, he is becoming more like Sir Avenox. T and Lorraine and Avenox still call each other with name. As Lorraine said, Lix had blue eyes. It was amazing. Lorraine and Avenox met and gave birth to a child who resembled the two. The two people I've seen since they were teenagers suddenly looks very grown up. However, that was the first impression I had on seeing Lix. Cute. So small. It wasn't like the twins were rioting next to each other. It was a rather blunt reaction that you look just like your mom and dad. You don't usually have much interest in small children, so I thought it was. Obviously it was. Lix, who was only interested in Lorraine's hair a little while ago, found me. Bright eyes full of curiosity blinked a few times at me. Kikya! He still flapped his short arms. He didn't have teeth yet, so he smiled softly with his small red mouth like a baby bird. So cute. Oh my, Lorraine said to me, who was dazed by Lick's blunt attack, as if surprised. Baby smile. He's so shy these days, but it's amazing that he liked Tia, whom he has never seen for the first time. Really? Does a small child recognize the blood? My heart fluttered at Lick's clear lake eyes, staring at me. Do you want to hug him? Oh no, I don't think that's right. He's too small. What if I accidentally drop it by mistake? When I placed my hands, Lorraine smiled as if it was understandable. That was then. Cough. With a small coughing sound, Lick's vomited milk dripped down Lorraine's dress. Oops, vomit. Oh, is he sick? Is it because there are so many people? Shouldn't we get some fresh air from the outside? The twins, as surprised as I was were restless. It's okay. Babies are like this sometimes, but I have to change my clothes. I'll help you, Miss Lorraine. Can you please, Sir Avenox? The bride and groom who got married today looked at each other and smiled affectionately. Then, Lix, Lorraine, who seemed to be agonizing for a while, suddenly held out Lix in Paris' arms, who was looking at Lix strangely. I'll be right back, Your Majesty. Please take Lix for a moment. Lorraine, who said so, moved away with Avenox. Oh, Perez, TN, lololololol, XD. Speechless, Perez didn't answer. He couldn't move as Lorraine gave Lix to him. Are you okay? Yes, I don't think so. Lix looked quite comfortable, even in Perez's arms, which had been hardened like stone statue. No, beyond being comfortable, he seemed to like Perez very much. A boo-boo. Lix's small hand, with an incomprehensible babbling, grabbed Perez's clothes. And oh, he buried his chubby face like a pure white steamed bun in Perez's strong arms. He closed his eyes tightly to see if he's going to sleep and even rubbed his eyes. Ah, so cute. He's my nephew, but can he be this cute? Wait, what could Lix need? With that in mind, I was making a list of gifts for Lix. Pat, pat. I could see Perez gently patting Lix on the back. His hand that covering the back, which was small enough to be proud of breathing, looked particularly big. After hesitating for the first time or two, Perez soon comforted Lix with a skillful gesture. Phew, I could see Lick's eyelids getting heavier and heavier. Luman's deep blue eyes, like the sea, blinked a few times, and then soon the shadows of long eyelashes descended. I looked at the two without making any sound. He looked so peaceful that even the sound of his breathing could be heard. It looks much better than you thought, right? Said Lorraine, who returned in a new dress with a low voice. Oh, that's right, more than I thought. What should I say about this feeling? There was a mixture of strange emotions, and it was not easy to put it into words. It's great. In the end, all I could say was one word. Your Majesty will be a good father. Is that so? It's like looking at it now. At Lorraine's words, I had no choice but to nod. Suddenly, the form that was holding Lix changed to a stable one, and although it was still stiff, the eyes looking down at the child were full of warmth. I'm sure it will. Lorraine's way of speaking contained firm conviction. How's the East? When I asked, Lorraine answered with a smile. Great. After coming here, it has become very strong. Lorraine's blue eyes gleamed with vitality. You have found your hometown, Lorraine. Hometown? After thinking for a while, she soon nodded. That's right. I think that's how it feels. Hometown. And now, Lorraine looked at Lix. I want to make this land where Lix lives in a better place. That's how you achieved wheat farming. Actually, I was a little surprised. I already knew from what I had seen and heard in my previous life about the treatment of wheat disease that would spread in the south, so there was no doubt about its effectiveness. However, wet farming in the east was a completely different matter. At Lorraine's request, I sent some scholars from Lombardy, but I honestly didn't expect it to be successful in such a short period of time. Lorraine, who smiled proudly at Lix, seemed to be a slightly different person from the one I knew. Lorraine is getting stronger. At my words, Lorraine shyly dyed her cheeks like she did when she was a child, but at the same time she nodded firmly because I have something to protect. Something to protect. Just as Lorraine looked at Lix, my gaze unconsciously turned to Paris. Paris was staring at Lix, who had now completely fallen asleep. Then suddenly, a subtle smile spread over his expressionless face. It was a small change that loosened his stiff lips, but it was a smile that was as comfortable as a sleeping Lix. How many things had happened before that the dark man in my previous life and the boy who was guarding the collapsing star palace alone could laugh like that? Then, as if feeling my gaze, Perez raised his head. Our eyes met immediately. He didn't look away, as if we were the only ones in the countless people going to and from the banquet hall. How much time has passed like that? Perez smiled. His eyes were nicely curved, and his lips were drawn in a good-looking arc. It was a smile flower that only bloomed toward me. I want to protect you too, just like Lorraine did with farming in Loman for leeks. I also wanted to protect Perez. That's why I have to be stronger in the future. It was a promise to myself. It was also a promise to protect that person no matter what happened in the future, so that Perez can always smile like that. And before I knew it, a smile resembling that of him appeared on my face as well. Suddenly, I had such a hunch. You too, and me too. We will probably remember this moment for a long time. Even in the distant future, we will hold hands together and talk about today, and we will be smiling together even then. Until that day, we will go through all kinds of hardships together, but it will be okay. Because those who have something to protect become stronger. It looks like an angel is sleeping. Shh, be quiet, you idiot. The twins couldn't stand it any longer and gathered around Perez to watch Lix fall asleep. The sight of three big men surrounding a small baby somehow made me happy. A long time ago, I told Lorraine, who was suffering from forced marriage, Lorraine, you need to find something that makes you happy. So I asked Lorraine, are you happy now? Then the answer immediately came back. Yes, I'm happy. Okay then, that's enough. It doesn't matter where you start, where your heart is filled with joy, that is home. Ewing. There was a sound of Lix waking up and crying. He cries like that when he finds his mother. Lorraine shook her head as if she couldn't help it and laughed. Joy was reflected on the back of Lorraine walking toward Lix. Thank God. Having returned to Lombardy with a withered cold, Lorraine came back once and now took root here in Luman, and now she lives happily in a land that is warm, sunny, and sung by friendly songs. I will go. Then shall I hug Leeks too? Avenox has already returned, and above all, his mother, Lorraine, is by his side, so I can just ask her to teach. I took a step toward Perez and my family who were far away, because they're my hometown. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. And again, the present. Miam, miam. The season when cicadas cry loudly. I smiled as I entered the Lombardi's office. It's been a month since I saw you, Patriarch Susu. The end. It's back to side story chapter 0. Haha. End of chapter 280.